So I do have one question that I thought of when you were talking about you did the regression and helped the woman remember that her husband had cheated on her. Now in the 90s there was like this whole like regressive therapy hypnosis thing that they were trying to find, like all of these sex cults, and there was just like all of these children that were accusing people of molesting them and all this stuff, and it was just like this insane thing. And I for some reason I feel like regressive like memories was kind of what they were talking about with that. So
Oh yeah,
how do you and they were talking about how really what happened was that they were putting memories into kids' heads, and um and not only did it destroy the lives of the people that were in prison like based on this, but they gave that child trauma. Like they gave them the trauma of
yeah.
being abused when they never had been. So
Oh, this
how
is yeah.
yeah, so how do you make sure that like they're leading you to the right place and that they're not I don't even know how to really word it. I'm just curious
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
just know that
So,
whole
so what?
craze in the 90s
Yeah.
and it was just like
So what you're talking about is false memory syndrome. And here's a point to understand: it wasn't hypnotists that were working with these
it was
people. It was
therapist.
psychiatrists and psychologists. The average psychologist, psychiatrist, the last time I checked, when they go to school to study psychiatry, psychology, last time I checked, they do less than 2 weeks of their 4-year degree, 2 years masters, less than 2 weeks on hypnosis. So it's important to understand that there is lots of books about false memory syndrome. Mid-80s, kids would go to the psychiatrist, psychologist, and they'd come out and suddenly they found out their parents were abusing them and they never knew. Most of these cases, if not all of them, were proved to be false. So number one, like any field, there's good hypnotists, bad hypnotists, good psychiatrists, bad psychiatrists, good mechanics, bad
Do your
mechanics.
research.
Yeah, exactly. But first of all, the thing is, if I may potentially, I'm a soldier, and I've got tremendous post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm coming back from a war torn, right? And I'm in a safe environment now. My head knows this. My body still thinks I'm in the fucking war. The semantic system. You can logic it all you want. They know they're not in Afghanistan anymore. Their body still thinks they're in the middle of a fucking war, and a hand grenade's going to go off and they're going to die. Right? It's semantic is the body. So if I'm a soldier, big heavy problem, right? And I'm working with a hypnotist or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, I probably want to work with someone who had more than 2 weeks training in this specific area. If I equally, if I'm going to court for someone says I murdered somebody,
You don't want
I
the guy
probably,
that just
I
graduated and
probably want to resurrect Johnny Cochran's corpse because I know he's really good at getting people off of murder.
you don't want the guy that failed the bar 4 times.
Exactly. What
And
is that?
I think that's an interesting point because I do suffer from PTSD and I do have repressed memories, but I have an amazing psychiatrist and she is like she we don't try to do hypnosis or anything. Like we don't do it. But it makes perfect sense because she's like it's not a psychological best practice. It's not a best practice for your therapist to do that. So I think that really keys it in. It's like if you find someone that has been trained to do this, but if you go to a therapist and are like, hey, let's hypnotize you, that's where you got to be like, maybe I should question this a little bit. That's it. I think it's a
Yeah.
really interesting point. Like you really did very well answer like the question that I was thinking, like, how is this different? And it's because it wasn't hypnotists doing it.
Yeah,
Oh, and you don't
that's
want
really
the
cool.
Vegas guy doing it either.
Yeah, and and the other important thing to understand is it's about not asking leading questions. So like I got I don't know 357 techniques, and I make up 5 every day. Right? Someone made up all this shit. It's all made up, but
Yeah.
so is our problem. All right, doesn't mean it isn't real. Doesn't mean we don't suffer from it. Doesn't mean we don't feel it. So someone comes in and let's say I do regression with them. I am not filling in the blanks. So let's say they've got anxiety. Anxiety comes up in their body. In a moment, we're going to go back this time. Blah, 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 blah. whenever it first reared its ugly head. 3, 2, 1. Are you inside or out? Are you with someone or by yourself? How old are you? Look at your feet for an indication of your age. Report what's going on. Not, are you sitting on your uncle's lap? With your uncle's hands? This is all leading.
Yeah, that's
Unconscious is vulnerable, and it's like they're unconscious, subconscious. You're in a pool and they're drowning, and you throw a life preserver in. The life preserver is someone unscrupulous or not trained saying, giving them the information that's not there. Mine is report what's going on, and I just sit back, report what's going on, and what else is going on. Okay, so and what are you feeling? And you might be like, well, is that the honestly, is that the first event? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because whatever
it's
whatever
the one that their mind's taking them to.
Yes. Whatever, if it wasn't the first event, why did it bring this one in? It brought this memory in for a reason.
I think that's a great takeaway, because, you know, I was like, I'm curious, just because, like, it makes so much more sense to me now, because, you know, I do have the great therapist, and she is the one that does PTSD. Like, she is, you know, I did my research and I found the one that was great for me. And she's like, no, we're not going to try to pull these memories out of your head. It's not psychological best practice. And it makes sense, because, like, you're not going to go have the lawyer put the new engine in your car. Highly trained, went to a lot of school, but he's not going to fix your car engine, most likely. So I think
I'm not going to go to a boxing coach to teach me how to kick. He can teach me a mean right cross, but he ain't going to teach me anything about front kicking a motherfucker that's about to attack me. You want to get the right material. And also, as a change worker, when I'm working with someone, if they email me and they're like, Luke, their first thing is, Luke, do you do past life regression? Luke, do you do regression? They haven't told me one thing about their issue, but they're coming in with that. That's their first thing. Already alarm bells are stuff. Why are they telling me what to do? And why are they asking me specifically if I do this? And if they do make it to a stage where we are on a screening call, I'll ask them a question like, I noticed on your questionnaire, you talked about past life regression or regression in general. I'm just curious, if you could resolve all your issues around whatever their problem is, presenting from anxiety, depression, PTSD, if you could resolve all of those issues around your problem and it no longer made you suffer, would it matter if we regressed you or not? So you know the answer I'm looking for is no. As long as it goes, I'm happy. If they're like, no, Luke, that's not enough, I need you to regress me, I'm probably going to refer those people on, because there's something else going on and I don't really want to play that game.
Yeah, I started the podcast Alice in Wonderland as I'm writing my memoir, Allison in Wonderland. It's kind of a psychological case study of my life. And I recently wrote what I call the lost chapter. And it talks about the beginning of the memory, the end of the memory, but the middle is what's missing. And it does kind of talk about, like, part of me feels like I need to finish the memory to make it be okay. And then part of me is like, my mind built up these barriers for a reason. But I guess it's like, yeah, if I didn't have insomnia or anxiety, then it wouldn't matter if I remembered or not. So, like, it makes sense being like, hey, if I could go without remembering and then be okay, then I could see how it would be a red flag if they're like, no, I must remember. Because why don't you want the bad shit out of your head? Why would you want more bad shit in your head?
And another red flag, and I have this, you know, more than a few times every year, and it's like, Luke, here's the email. Luke, I think I was sexually abused when I was 7. Can you regress me back to that time so I can know if I was sexually abused or not? To which I say, if you went back to that time and you found out you were sexually abused, do you think you are going to feel better or worse about your life? Generally, it's like fucking worse, because it's a terrible, horrible thing. In which case, it's not ethical for me to take you back there to make you feel worse about stuff that may or may not have happened. I'm in the job, I'm in the business of empowering people, not fucking them, drowning them, holding their head down.
Yeah. You've really won me over because, I was like, how do I feel about like I didn't even know how I felt about it coming into the call because I loved your video about, hey, you got to meet with me and you have like this great dynamic and this great energy. But then at the same time, I'm like, I'm skeptical. Like I'm curious, but you have logical answers to all of the questions that you would think kind of have holes where people are like, hypnosis? Like, really? But you really understand what you're doing, and in my mind it is kind of like a whole different way of doing therapy. You're not putting thoughts into people's head. You're a professional. You've